Hey, ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of DentistMetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. When patients visit the dentist, they're typically there to address dental hygiene, but what today's guest advocates for may surprise you. I'm very excited to bring on today's guest, Dr. Tom Larkin, whose accomplishments go way beyond the walls of a dental office. He's a true Renaissance man in dentistry. Dr. Larkin is the clinical director for Ideal Practices. He's also the founder of oralwellnesscenter.org, which is doing some incredibly fascinating things as far as linking the oral systemic health with dentistry. He's also an instructor at Louisville's School of Dentistry. But first, here are a few things you're going to hear about today. You're going to hear about the number one thing Dr. Larkin did to get lucky, as well as how to start making a lot of money from the start, the 3 keys to financial management, a skill set that has served Dr. Larkin immensely well in dentistry and consulting, the number one problem that Dr. Larkin had when he opened his practice, what you never ever want to assume when you're first getting out of dental school, some issues that occur after the acquisition of a new practice that students are not ready for, an interesting characteristic about dental practices that typically go up for sale, and ignoring this can be a very costly mistake. The 2 different models in dentistry, and one of these is the model of the future and has a significant fee-for-service component to it. At the end of this episode, you'll find out where you can get a bonus that helps patients become more aware of potential health concerns that go way beyond oral health. So be sure to listen all the way through this entire interview to get access to that. Now, here's my interview with Dr. Tom Larkin. Hello, ambitious dentist. Today I have with us an incredibly interesting person. He is a true Renaissance man in dentistry. I've had the pleasure of being able to meet him through Jamie Amos's company, Ideal Practices. We've been presenters together at a couple of conferences, and the guy just really loves the business of dentistry. He is Dr. Tom Larkin. Dr. Tom Larkin is the clinical director for Ideal Practices. He's also the founder of oralwellnesscenter.org, which is doing some incredibly fascinating things as far as linking oral systemic health with dentistry, which I saw his presentation on that. And when I got back to my room at night, I called my wife and I was like, I need to make sure that I don't have any heart issues because he pointed things out so well to me that it actually made a difference in my life. So he is also an instructor at both Louisville's School of Dentistry as well as Kentucky's, and he is just a fantastic dentist, businessman, entrepreneur. Like I said, he's a Renaissance man. He's had many hours in doing things like web development and raising horses and all of these super interesting things. So I'm incredibly excited to get to talk to my friend, Dr. Tom Larkin. Dr. Larkin, how's it going?
Awesome. Great to be here, Jonathan.
So Dr. Tom, you have this incredibly interesting story, and I almost have like a million different points I could start out with to start asking you about it. But tell us the story about whenever you were in dental school and how you got your first practice going.
Okay, let me tell you about how I met Jamie Amos, because Jamie came into my website last summer, and somehow deep down in my bio is this little footnote that I built and sold a dental practice while I was in dental school. And actually, it's been so long ago, I didn't think a lot about it. And so when he contacted me, he said, "Did you really do that?" I said, "Yeah." And I told him the story. He's like, "Wow." And then that's how our relationship began, because Jamie's like the premier startup person in America. And I'm like this crazy guy that did a startup in dental school and happened to change my mind, and then at the last minute sold it. And so he wanted to know that story. And the presentation that I did at the Startup Practice Blueprint, I had never done for dental students before. I hadn't thought it was that significant. So Jamie completely has turned my world upside down, and now I will be leading with that presentation. So the story was, I can't tell you where I got this misconception, but back in the day, almost everyone went into private practice when they graduated. And I thought that when you graduated on Saturday, that Monday morning at 8, you opened your door and you started your practice. And so I planned accordingly. And for some reason, even back then, I understood demographics and getting off the beaten path a little bit. And I'm going to talk about that today, in that everybody wants to stay in a university town. Omaha's a university town. And I went 45 or 50 miles away to a very small community and basically cold called the mayor. I went to a gas station. I said, "Where's the mayor?" They pointed to this office, and he sold insurance. And I just walked in and introduced myself. And within a half hour, I walked out with the mayor agreeing to vacate his space, rent it to me. And my roommates and I went up on the weekends and we did all the leasehold improvements. We had some floor plan classes in school. And the mayor took me to the bank, got a line of credit. I had no money, no experience, no anything. We built a 3-operatory office. You saw the pictures of it. I mean, it was pretty awesome for back then. And it was all ready to go, teed up in April. And then I got an opportunity to go to your neck of the woods, which was Arkansas. That was a practice that I had shadowed in, it was a different world. You know, if there's a common thread in my world, it's always been the horses, and Hot Springs is like, you know, at the time, and it is right now, a very vibrant horse racing town. And that was the allure. Okay. That was the only thing that made me leave, because I had a primo setup in, you know, outside of Omaha. And so I sold it in May and, you know, loaded up the U-Haul and went to Hot Springs. And that was how that all happened. But, you know, without showing the slides to show you, I mean, we literally built the practice.
It was true Americana of seeing a bunch of dental students up there putting wiring things together, or working the plumbing, just making it happen, which was, it was a fantastic story. Yeah. So whenever you went to go and acquire that practice in Hot Springs, Arkansas, did you acquire the whole thing initially, or did you associate for a while?
And it wasn't by plan. What happened was that the dentist who I bought the practice became disabled about 6 months into our associateship. So we had an associateship that was going to lead to that. And it was just like one weekend, you know, he had something happen, and the next Monday I'm in charge of this, you know. So I was still at a point, and that was one thing. He had mentored me and taught me a lot of things even up until then. Rotary endo, you know, he was doing rotary endo back in the early 80s, which, you know, he taught me rotary endo, lots of advanced crown and bridge. So when he left, I went from seeing, you know, 2 or 3 patients a day to like his full schedule with hygiene and stuff, it was just 6 months of hell. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. But, you know, that wasn't by design. Okay. So that's how that happened. That transition happened. And it was a premier practice. I mean, that's why I went there. I mean, he had such an impressive practice.
So I always like to hear from people whenever they take over a practice, and especially the guys that are, because I typically have people on that have, you know, an entrepreneurial bug, you know, a little bit higher than the average Americans, and I know you have that. So what was your, you know, you said you went through 6 months of hell. How were you balancing the, you know, the clinical duties of being a medical doctor while being a business owner at the same time, or being a new business owner?
Well, you know, I think that whole process of doing my startup and going, you know, since I had done the startup and had looked at like bookkeeping, I mean, I had gone through the entire process, kind of similar to Janie's thing, all of the different steps. So it wasn't like it wasn't foreign to me. Okay. So I step in as an associate, and he has his ready-made systems and everything. I understood, you know, at the time it was pegboard. This is like pre-computers. Okay. I understood the pegboard because I had set it up in Nebraska. Okay. And so that was not a big stretch for me. The biggest thing was, you know, I immediately stretched office hours to like 7 in the evening, just because I was slower and I was trying to accommodate people. And you know, I was literally, I couldn't even tell you how many hours a week I worked just to get my clinical speed up and try to absorb that, because I just didn't want the practice to be disrupted, you know, the flow of the practice. Okay.
Sure.
And I wouldn't recommend that, you know, that type of a, you know, situation for anyone, but it wasn't planned. Okay. That wasn't a planned deal. So, but as far as like the business end, it wasn't you know, and the other thing, you know, a dental practice wasn't nearly as sophisticated as it is today. It's a little, you know, the systems are a little more sophisticated. So I wasn't making any changes. I inherited the staff, and I actually kept almost his entire staff my entire career. I only had one dental assistant my entire life, and it was his dental assistant.
That is a unicorn, I believe, is what they call that. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So that was very lucky that you were able to do that. So whenever you were running your business, were there any, obviously getting your clinical speed up to date and being up to speed to try and match someone who'd been doing it for so long would had to have been difficult. But was there any other types of business challenges that you had whenever you were going through the ownership cycle?
One of the things that I would consider this luck, and I know that luck is about opportunity and putting yourself in the right position. I just had great mentors, and at every point when I needed someone, they kind of appeared. And I can tell you that financially, I started making a lot of money very, very soon for whatever reason. And I happened to meet someone, actually I had a classmate that had some financial issues, and he asked me to go to a seminar of Greg Stanley of Whitehall Management. Greg, back in the early 80s, was kind of the premier. He spoke to both dentists and chiropractors on financial management. His whole thing was prepay debt, okay, save aggressively, and invest conservatively. And at the time, his whole thing was municipal bonds, okay? And I just... and it's like before Dave Ramsey. Okay. I mean, that's kind of Dave Ramsey's shtick, except his investment deal is different. And his whole premise was, if you've got $2 million worth of municipal bonds yielding 6%, life is good. You're done. You don't have to worry about selling your practice. You can walk away, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm saying is I had incredible people make an influence on early. Okay. And then I can go from Greg Stanley to Earl Estep, and Earl Estep was like, these are like old time guys, Jerry, I was telling you about Jerry Jones, and Jerry knows some of them, but these are like the original practice management people that just molded and shaped my view. Howard Ferran, he didn't go to dental school at Creighton, but he went to undergrad, so he was a few years behind me. But I can remember, gosh, in Howard's first or second year, he was on the cover of maybe Dental Economics of the first person to produce $1 million in 1,200 square feet. I don't know what it was, but I'm like calling Howard, and when you have people like that, that you're really kind of hitching your wagon to, I didn't have to figure a lot out. I just had really smart people that I chose. Okay. I did make a decision, but I knew right off the bat, I took a ton of CE.
Yeah, and if you look back at history, I mean, if you look at the people who've had just an incredible success, they have the ability to kind of figure out who those people are.
Yes.
Again, there's luck, like you said, but it's also, luck is where, opportunity meets being in the right place or hard work. Yeah. And so, you have the insight to be able to separate the wheat from the rye, to be able to say these are the guys that are know what they're doing, because I'm sure even like, especially right now, there's a million people out there that say they know what they're doing, and you got to figure out the ones that really know what they're doing. So that's a good story for people to take home, to say you got to surround yourself with people that have a vested interest in what you're doing, or they're someone who's been able to prove that they know what they're talking about.
Well, I think the challenge today, and I had this conversation with Jamie, and I think you and I may have talked about it there, is there's just so much information. Young dentist, it's almost an overload. And I still take tons of CE, and I'm always kind of underwhelmed with the quality of some of it. And I think one of the things that you saw with the Startup Practice Blueprint was the quality of the presenters, and even everybody who attended saying, wow, I've never gotten such good, rock solid information. I always use the example. I tell about going to a major presenter who, when they came to the internet, said you need to be on the first page of Google. That was the take-home point. And it's like how just incredibly disappointing that is to say, I paid money for somebody to tell me that. Yeah. And you saw my presentation about branding. I showed those people at the practice how to do it. Okay, completely different thing. So how you find that today, I don't really know. I think these podcasts and this network, we talked about the network that's kind of developed of really reputable, smart people. I think the younger millennials are finding those people. Okay, they're finding you, they're finding Jamie, they're finding Jerry Jones, and they're kind of locking into like the podcast sphere, and they're getting unbelievable information for free. I mean, you can't believe it. I just direct people and I say, man, just eat this for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because it's not, you're not going to get it in school at all.
Yeah, I think I remember speaking with an older doc one time about the podcast generation, and his statement was that this is 2 or 3 podcasts at this point would have been what you'd have paid like $5,000 for back in 20, 30 years ago, just for what it's given. I mean, whenever I first started I started out doing blog posts, and the first blog post that I did that I got any real traction on was one talking about dental metrics, talking about some of the numbers I'd seen in my practices that we had, that I thought were indicators of actual success and things that were important there. And I had people that reached out to me that were consultants, and they were mad at me because they were like, they literally would say, this is stuff that we charge for. This is information that we make people pay us for, and you're all you guys got it sent on a website somewhere.
Right.
Like, well, people paid me for it too, but me showing them this information doesn't do anything. I think you and I had this discussion of, I kind of think as far as like the way information is given out now is there's probably more than 3 layers, but in my head, I think of 3 layers immediately to say, number one is saying, you've got to get first in Google. The second is saying that, these are ways that you can do that, so that, that's a little bit higher level. And then finally, the third information level is showing case studies of people who've actually done specific things to be able to get to those areas.
Exactly.
I would say there's different values in that. And if you want to kind of say like not an information level, but a fourth level would be a service level to say, here's what we can do this for you in return, typically for money is a service. So yeah, absolutely. And the podcasts are a way to kind of get into that second and third level a lot. That is just, and also like the written word nowadays is a lot harder to take in for people to be able to learn from. So being able to hear it is very important because, a lot of us in school are used to listening to lectures and, well, obviously reading as well, but most of the time you're listening for a little bit more entertainment value than anything else. So, yeah. So tell me about whenever you left, whenever you finished in Hot Springs, what happened after that? Did you go straight to Kentucky at that point? No.
So I went back to Nebraska, and that's the first time that I started teaching, and that was back at Creighton University, and that was a period where I was transitioning to part-time practice because I've had some back surgeries, and that's kind of been one of the continuums in my life, which I was telling you, I was at physical therapy yesterday that never goes away. And it was a period, so this is in the late 90s, and I never ever thought that I would ever walk into my dental school again. And I think a lot of dental students have that, feeling. And so I was contacted by someone that said, would you be interested? And I said, hey, at this point, I'm looking at other options, practicing part-time or whatever. And I just found an immediate home. I found that I was effective, and the students came to me because I had practiced at an extremely high level. And it was very, very unexpected that I got into, writing a book about a startup. I wrote a book in '95 about the startup practice and teaching. And then the whole technology thing kind of came in when I started the first dental e-commerce site. I think it was in '98. And we talked about how that was when Dental Town launched, and I was in a different e-commerce direction, and my thing just went in the crapper because it was too early. And then Howard had the right idea, this concept of community, and no dentist will ever be alone again, practice alone. And that was just a bigger, better concept, and kudos to him for punching that through. But have
you heard the story of how he thought of that? His son, he shared that on my podcast, saying that his son was on a board talking about skateboards, and he was like, if people are on there talking about skateboards, why can't we talk about dentistry?
Exactly. I mean, just that simple. I mean, those are the kind of simple concepts, and mine was, I actually started building dental auction before eBay went live. I had read an article, and I just said, man, there is just so much dental equipment, used dental equipment, there needs to be a platform to trade it. But I hadn't thought through, shipping, how do you ship a dental chair? Well, back in '98, you couldn't. I mean, it was just, now you can work out the logistics. The infrastructure is there, okay, to do shipping and fulfillment. But back then, my concept was rock solid, but the timing was just completely wrong. But what I did was I went back to school and I took the first web development, e-commerce, everything that the University of Nebraska offered on web, because I just said, anybody who has that combined, that skill set, and so that has served me, immensely well, both in dentistry and in consulting and everything, just knowing the internet from day one.
Sure. So, absolutely. Yeah. So, and then you at that point, you went over to Kentucky at that point
So in 2009, I've always come to Lexington to visit because it's the horse capital of the world. It's the only town next to Hot Springs that probably would say that. And I saw an opening. There was a teaching position here, and I said, I'm going to go back and kind of revisit that whole thing, because I was at a point in my life where I said, I want to do things that I enjoy and that are fun. And that was one that I really, really enjoyed. And so then that's when I moved here in 2009. And then, it's just been a very, very, it's been an interesting ride. I mean, Jamie was the one that really kind of took a lot of my content. When I meet somebody like you or Jerry Jones, I said, I've done great things on a tiny scale. Okay. I've never been kind of out there, but my stuff is very good, as you've seen.
Yeah.
But it's always been to a very small office. I always had, maybe a couple consulting clients at a time, nothing on a big scale. And so when I got into this American Academy of Oral Systemic Health, and I started defining what advanced prevention is, and it's a huge field going forward. And then I've just explosively started meeting people online, and then with my being clinical director for Jamie and Ideal Practices, and helping bring innovation to the startup and energy to that. It's been crazy. It's been really, really interesting and fulfilling. And I'm working all the time, but I love it. I love it.
Sure. You're getting so much entrepreneurial so many entrepreneurial things going around you that I'm sure that it's just like a kid at a candy store a lot of the times.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, so you saw a lot of students, you've probably kept in touch with a lot of them over time, and you've seen some of the successes and you've seen some of the failures and things like that. I know we have a lot of dental students that actually listen to the podcast.
Right.
So what are some of the things that you've seen happen that you wish could be remedied out there for the dental students?
Well, one of the things that I particularly was interested in what you were doing, because I did teach practice management, and I have students bring me, current things, and then people that have graduated bring me stuff. Now, I don't give, accounting opinions or legal opinions, but I can kind of look at the overall. And I just see accounting kind of being stuck in this time warp, kind of like old school dentistry, in that they present things to people in a very, like you're an accountant, did you understand a P&L? Mm-hmm. And that was really a source of frustration. I was like, why doesn't somebody change this presentation? And then when I saw your stuff that was super intuitive, here's trending and this and that and the other, so much information, I'm like, why doesn't this become, and I know you're trying to create a standard, you're trying to elevate the presentation, but that's probably the number one problem that I had was on the accounting side. Okay, I can talk about other things in general. I'll tell you a couple of funny ones. Somebody gave me an employment agreement that had a 90-day trial period, and on the covenant not to compete went back to the first day, so that you had to leave town if you didn't successfully stay on the practice. And then the doctor wanted a refund of everything that he paid you during the 90 days.
Oh,
and
gosh.
I'm like, I've seen, crazy stuff. And this is, one of my points that I always say is never deal with a dentist directly. Never. Okay. Because I've had some very talented students that kind of ran into some train wrecks, and I told Jamie this once in a podcast. I think what happened was you're in an environment in school where most of the instructors are basically on your team. So you kind of develop a trust quotient. Dr. Larkin is looking out for me, blah, blah, blah. And then you go out and you meet a dentist, and you just assume because he's a dentist, he's on your team too. No. Don't ever assume that. Okay. And students don't feel like they have the power to say, can I have this looked at by an attorney? No, they think that that's like a threatening thing. No, that's what business people do. I'm going to have my accountant review this. I'm going to have my attorney review this. And students are reluctant to bring that kind of language to the table. Hey, there's a lot at stake. Okay. You need to bring that to the table. For sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A spit and a handshake doesn't go very far nowadays, unfortunately.
No.
You would think in Arkansas it probably would, but I've got horror stories just like everybody else from
Sure.
people that have been approached and joined as an associate, and then been promised the moon, and then a couple of years go by,
Over and over again.
Yeah,
No.
all they do is they end up in the dirt. So yeah, it happens all the time. So okay, so as far as after they have gone to these places that they've hopefully have had an attorney look at their employment contract, or hopefully have had some type of accountant or CPA be able to talk to them about implications of taxes and things like that, and they're about to either start or acquire a practice. What has you said that you actually look at some of these people's I guess valuations or some of the numbers to be able to kind of opine a little bit about what your thoughts are on how much they should pay or not pay. What are some issues that you've seen after that transaction has occurred, after the practice is in their ownership, that you just don't think that the students were ready for?
Great, super question, vital question. Jamie and I just did a series for ADA Success on transitions, and this was one of them. Okay, so practices today, they're full spectrum, going from complete full fee for service, which would be kind of considered the gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie and I don't think that's the gold standard, to 100% PPO, and then somewhere in between, kind of a hybrid. And so what I like to look at is what I call the velocity, meaning how quickly is this practice, because all practices are having to address the PPO world. Okay, so how quickly are they morphing? Because this hybrid model is where you get into trouble, meaning that if you have the overhead built around fee for service, and then you start taking on plans that are 30 or 40% reduction, that's going to eat away very quickly. So a practice needs to grow, let's just use it conservatively, 10% a year, and let's say that it's fee for service. The biggest surprise I see is that the purchaser, the young dentist, finds out, I don't have the skills, the network, or whatever to go get fee for service patients. Okay, I have little kids that are in school. All those people have PPOs. I go to church. They want to come to me, but they have PPOs. So you're going to have to make a decision right off the bat, pretty quickly on how are you going to address the PPO world. Okay, and that is a universal issue right now.
I mean, and what happens if the next president decides whatever health insurance policy the United States covers, is dental is required to be a part of that, and then everybody has dental insurance at that point.
Right. But it's a different practice model, and that's why when I first met Jamie, I was so intrigued with the startup being a blank slate, and that you could kind of create from scratch, because there's more downsides to the transition than I thought. Okay, that I've learned. I would say when I went to San Antonio, I met you in San Antonio, and I was a presenter, but I also was an observer, because it was the first time I had seen everybody together, and I was wanting to be very critical of the process for my own satisfaction, and that's where I was like, wow, now I totally get this. I mean, I knew what my part was, but I didn't see all of the pieces put together in the startup, and I was like, so that, to me, that is the number one thing, is understanding. Can you make the PPO model profitable? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Sure you can. Sure you can. But if you buy a practice with its a high overhead practice to start with, and then they start nibbling on it, well, you can get that hybrid practice is where you can get into trouble.
Sure. And there's just the case of, like we said earlier, surrounding yourself with the people that can be able to give you good advice and good information. With the acquisitions, I believe that acquisitions are a very viable way to be able to get into the industry and become a business owner. However, there's a lot of really bad practices that come up for sale. And the ones that are really good, a lot of the times, are really, really tough to find.
Right.
There can be diamonds in the rough at that point. At that point, a lot of the times it's the person that you knew that was your dentist when you were a kid, and he kind of was a mentor of yours growing up. Like
right.
That is like and sometimes that isn't the ideal case, but every once in a while that does happen. But there's so many practices that are doing $500,000 to $800,000 a year, and they've got 65 or 75% overhead. They're kind of in that profitable, not profitable stage, and then you add in the note payment, and the client's making as much as an associate was.
Yeah.
There's an old saying that it's a lot harder to stop a snowball going downhill than it is to be able to build something up new a lot of the times. The practices that typically go up for sale are usually on some type of decline, because most people don't sell at the top. It's just like in stocks. They don't sell. You don't sell at the top. You sell whenever things start going bad, right? And especially with the way that the model is set up right now, if you're selling at 2 years net, then there's just not a whole lot of incentive for the doc to sell, because in 2 years they're not going to have any income comparatively to when they sold.
That's exactly right.
There's just not a lot of reason for a selling doc to sell a really good dental practice. So it's harder to find, and there are so many opportunities out there in the United States for startup practices and you can say today, I want to start a practice. You can talk to someone like Jamie, and then in 12 months your practice is open and you've got patients coming in, because they just know the blueprint at this point, right? So I am still a fan of the acquisition model, but it has to be under the right conditions, and you have to have the people around you telling you if it is the right condition or not for you. I have so many people that reach out to me that say that they're going to buy a $300,000 or $400,000 a year gross practice, that because they want to buy it cheap, and then they can just start from there. They don't look at the demographics. They don't look at the opportunity, and they don't look at what the reason why it's at $300,000 to $400,000 at this point in time. So, and it's just so difficult to build on top of that. So so that's my 2-minute discussion about what acquisition versus startup. Some people it's better than for others. So,
I think there've been a lot of practices from the 2008 and 2009 downturn that retirement was pushed out, and I think those are coming to market right now. I see a lot of practices, and unfortunately, I've seen a couple of practices that were like health, like emergency health, and that's the worst case scenario for a guy. If you take it to there, you've lost everything. Okay, if you have an emergency health issue and you can't come back, that's you're just liquidating assets, and that's what happens when you hang on too long. So there's a whole variety of practices, but like you said, the demographics, outdated equipment, outdated decor, that all needs to be looked at, very, very critically. And I do think, maybe a chart acquisition might be a more reasonable way to look at some of these practices and say, I'm going to merge this into a better location, more updated, whatever. But it's a very dynamic market. And the other thing that we need to mention is that the really, really Ferrari practices, they're being acquired by the corporate. Okay. They have the systems, they're running smooth. They get valuations that a dentist can't touch, 5 times earnings, EBITDA, and then you go from there. I've heard crazy numbers. So those are off of the market. Okay. Really, the Ferraris were gone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, we had one recently. We had a client that was trying to acquire one, and the selling doc just kept putting it off, and finally we were super close. We were like a month away from signing the papers, and we find out that he'd been outbid by the sum of like $1 million plus stock options or something like that. So
no, you can't. You're not in that league. Okay, that's a whole separate. And for how long that's going to take place, who knows? But for right now, there's a ton of money available for and I think it actually depresses the prices on the other practices. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I don't think a rising tide lifts all boats. I don't think that's the case. I think that's a misconception. If you have a $500,000 practice and you think that someone stole one of the big box people raises yours, that's not true at all. You're in a whole different league.
So you said something that I thought was incredibly interesting as far as how the current business cycles were going. You'd said that if you had you would be willing to open up a dental practice right next door to an Aspen Dental every day of the week.
Yes.
Can you talk about what the reasons behind it?
Yeah, and this gets back to, and I talked a little bit about this at the seminar, and this kind of gets into what I'm seeing in healthcare in general. Okay. And I learned a lot helping this concierge physician. You know, we don't talk, well, dentists aren't aware that like MD VIP and some of this concierge physician where it's private pay, cash retainers, it's growing by leaps and bounds. Okay. What it is a, you know, it's a pushback from our current healthcare system, that people don't like our healthcare system and the people with any kind of resources. So what I'm saying is, there's two models in dentistry which I see, which is transaction based, and that's disease repair. Same thing in medicine. It's end disease repair. You go and you have a disease and you get it fixed. The other area where I think the opportunity is relationship based, and it's on prevention and health. Okay, it's the whole people that would describe themselves as being green. They recycle. They like organic food. You know, people are very conscious now of the poisons in our food and everything. And dentists are not dialing into that. That's the model of the future. And that actually has a fairly significant fee-for-service component to it. Mm-hmm. People will pay for that, okay? So when I see someone operationally that has a system, like you mentioned, who is very transaction-based, and they break all of the rules, and I'm going to talk about rules of what I call human nature. Human nature in this relationship model, you might come in and I just want to start building a relationship with you. I'm not going to present a big treatment plan to you. I'm not going to. We're going to start I'm going to find out where you're at, and I'm going to talk about being your advocate and your partner in health. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I may draw a picture in the future, whereas my competitor next door has to assess everything, come out with a payment plan, and close. Okay, that violates human nature. No one wants to be closed.
Yeah, you're lucky if it's the dentist. It may be the assistant doing a lot of that.
No, exactly. And it's part of the system. You know, the system is about diagnosis. Here it is, close. Okay, I'll compete with that. I'll sit up next to them all day. They'll just come into my office and find out what a relationship is like, where I just want to assist you on your journey in life, and I want to be the support, not only dentally. Now we're drawing that oral systemic connection that I'm defining. I make a very compelling case for why you need to go to the dentist, because people really, what's happened is, I think part of it happened when the when the medical insurance thing just kind of blew up and we all became responsible. You know, we have to take care of ourselves now, because before that was always delegated. Oh, I've got my insurance through work, blah, blah, blah. Well, now you're engaged. Okay. And just like you're a consumer, where you go and do your due diligence online when you buy something, you're engaged in your health, and you're saying, I got to pay, my deductible's $5,000. Okay. And I have certain wellness initiatives through my medical insurance, and they want me to do this and they'll reward me. Everybody's getting vested in the process. Okay. And that's what I see as a real change in it's a niche. Okay. Mm-hmm. Not huge, but it's there, and it's ripe for the taking. I know there are people, I've said this over and over again, there are people that are looking for a dentist that does not exist yet. I know that. I know that for sure. So that's what I'm in the process of and Jamie's of the belief that the ideal practice, young dentists, I've already met them, they share in this belief, and they want that to be a component of their startup, because, what a more beautiful thing than to start with the correct habits than going into a practice and kind of turning it around from a disease care to a preventive care.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And you can think about in a lot of other businesses that holds true. I mean, if you think about, if there's anyone out there and you think about Walmart, for example, my wife, we live in Arkansas, so we go to Walmart, and we go to Walmart and we get the essentials like, paper products and little things like that, cereal, stuff like that. But if she wants to get meat, she'll go to the local butcher shop, or she'll go to the Whole Foods, or the local, or if she wants produce, she'll go to the farmer's market or something like that. She goes to that place where she can have that a little bit more. Now, is Walmart selling a ton of meat and a ton of produce? Yeah, they're selling to some people. Right. But there are so many people out there that are just like, I'm not going to go to that because I want something a little bit higher value, and I can make that occur. I agree with what you're saying. You showed some very interesting numbers as far as Google search trends.
Yes.
Showing just the rapid increase of the searches related to that
Yeah.
topic, and I think you're onto something pretty large there. That'll be very, very interesting.
And I've got a really interesting network in that whole sphere. Kind of starting with Dr. Bale, who's the inventor of the Bale-Donine method, which is an anti-inflammatory. He's a physician who's developed an anti-inflammatory approach, who says if I remove all inflammation from your body, your chances of a heart attack or stroke fall to zero. And he's spent the last decade quantifying that. Now he has to practice, and the hundreds of physicians that he's trained in this protocol, they have to practice with a dentist. They have to have a dentist who understands salivary diagnostics, because he is of the belief that the mouth is a giant contributor to overall inflammation. If he ever has a question mark, I'm actually seeing a patient now, which is kind of interesting. Someone's letting me use their office, a patient of his that he had a question, and the person lived here. And I went ahead and did all the diagnostics, and sure enough, he had an oral infection, and that led to him having elevated markers, inflammatory markers in the bloodstream. So this is a very disruptive time in dentistry. There's going to be some new models come up, and I would love to, I'd love to be a part of kind of creating this physician dentist. That's one of the things that I'm kind of working on.
Very interesting. You said that about the inflammation, and I recall, I don't know if they're still doing this, but I recall, I think it was maybe Advil or aspirin would say that if the more often you took aspirin, the less likely you are to have a heart attack. There was some type of trend back in the days, and that's obviously, anti-inflammation. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So as far as going into today, we've talked about a lot of things as far as the trends in the industry right now. We've talked about startups and acquisitions and things like that. If it were you today, if you were starting a practice, tomorrow, what would your course of action be?
One of the things that I would want to be very cognizant of is the idea that at some point I'm going to be in a group situation. Okay, I don't think you want to swim too hard against that tide. Meaning, can you be a solo practitioner? Yes, but you're as an independent entrepreneur, if you're in some type of a group, you're going to be a little bit better insulated on many levels. Okay, and I have some different concepts. I'm actually working on a concept right now, which is someone who wants to start a practice, and I'm trying to get some specialists to do space share. So it's a group practice. The doctor owns the practice, but an orthodontist may own one operatory and come a couple of days a week, and kind of create a group environment around that solo practitioner from the beginning. Okay, kind of an interesting deal. And I'm also trying to put a physician in there to do the Bale-Donine thing. So I mean, that's one of the things conceptually that I'm working at. But I want a young person to know that. And then let me talk about. I told you about an article that I read about standard of living. Let me touch on this because this is really important. When I'm going to advise someone, this is not in the transition startup conversation as much as it should be. So there was an article in USA Today that said that a $100,000 standard of living in Memphis, Tennessee, was $250,000 in New York City. Okay, and that's probably San Francisco, LA, or whatever. So what I'm going to do from a comparison standpoint, I just want to bump that up a little bit to like 125, because that's probably more reflective of what a dentist might make in their first couple of years. And so that's 125, and proportionately it's 300. Okay, that's 300 in New York or LA. So what you need to know,
just so people out there hearing that he's saying that the dollars you're paid are going to be, you're going to be spending so much more. It's going to be, those are the equivalent exchanges, right?
Yeah. So I'm in Memphis and I'm making 125, and my dental school roommate gets a job in New York City for 300, which they're not getting for 300. But at the end of the day, after they pay rent and parking fees and all the overhead that goes with New York City, their disposable dollars at the end of the day are exactly the same. Exactly the same. Now watch this. So let's go to Memphis and let's draw a radius of 30 to 45 miles around Memphis. And I know this for a fact. I know that the demographic exists within that radius, just like I did. I got off the beaten path 45 minutes, okay?
Sure.
There's a demographic that exists that is not under the shadow of big box corporate, which everybody's worried about, okay? Mm-hmm. And that within a couple of years, and I'm sure you've seen this, that person can be making $250. Instead of $125, they're making $250, okay? You know, and they're in Bubble Butt, Tennessee. Okay,
sure.
And I can say that because I've been in Arkansas. And
yeah, I'm
not going to offend people in Tennessee.
Memphis is next door, so they're fine. We claim them.
But you get the point, okay? And so you know that people that are getting a little off the beaten path. So what's the sacrifice? The sacrifice is they're making a $600,000 New York City equivalent. Okay, mm-hmm. If they want to go to Broadway and see a play, they hop on a plane. Okay, they can hop on a plane and go for the weekend. Okay,
spend the reward points that they got from their credit card from running in the practice.
Yeah, but if they're making $250 in New York City, they're probably under a little bit of duress. But we need to. So that is so dramatic. That is so dramatic to think that that just getting in the right demographic, in the right standard of living. And you and I talked about how I enjoyed a very low cost of living in Arkansas. Okay, mm-hmm. That was part of my success. Was that taxes and everything was lower there. Okay, and now that I'm in Kentucky, I'm more in a retirement mode. Same thing, lower property taxes, lower everything. So there are places that you live. I don't think we talk enough to young people about standard of living and cost of living, because that's a huge variance. When I make it like 250, 600, when you think about that, that's dramatic. Okay, the equivalence of that. So we need to talk more and about that, as far as, what advice do you give a young person? Please, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, having the money and independence that comes from picking the right demographic, and maybe, everybody wants to stay in a university town. I see that all the time. I've been in 2 university towns. They want to stay in Lexington. They want to stay in Omaha. They want to. Why? Go 30 miles away and crush it. Okay.
Yep. There are people that are estimating that by 2018, self-driving cars will be becoming more and more mainstream, more likely that you could actually just get in your car, you work 25, 30 minutes away from your office, and you just punch in your office, and then you do work in the car while the car drives you. They're saying now that actually those trends, like that is such a reality that there are people that are real estate developers are starting to consider investing in areas surrounding metropolitan areas more heavily, because the value of the location will be less, because people will be in the car and be able to be more productive in the car at the same time.
Right.
So, if you're going to be able to do that, then, the commute is almost not, it doesn't make any difference at that point, because you can be, answering emails or talking with your CPA or doing, a million other things in that drive that are not lost. It's not lost time at that point.
Oh, for sure not.
Yeah. And so, that, again, I'm not trying to, figure out the future for everyone, but I mean, the technology, while it seems strange that the technology would be there, I think that, like, Google said that they had their self-driven cars have driven something like 250,000 miles, and like they've had one incident, and it was because the person accidentally put the foot on the pedal or something like that. I mean, it's there, it's coming.
Sure.
One way or the, if not in 2019, probably in the next 10 to 15 years. So very interesting. So if you were starting one today, it sounds like you're saying you would go with the with a startup in a low cost of living area, and then have the open-mindedness to know that a group practice would have a lot more strengths than a solo doc practice.
Correct. I think you have to, even in your facility, have the ability to say, can we add 4 or 5 more ops? That's why I love the vision call that Jamie and Steven do, is that, really stretch out. I mean, maybe you can't see 10 ops, 15 ops today, mm-hmm. but you need to, possibly.
Yep.
Okay. Because if you're in that right demographic and you have the ability to put a group together, you'll dominate. You'll actually discourage people from coming in. And those areas exist. They do exist. Okay. But it's just, you have to find them. Okay. And that takes a little bit of expertise. That's in Jamie's wheelhouse, not mine. But that's what I'm seeing, that there are opportunities in startups that people just don't know are available. They just don't have that information.
Sure.
But we're teaching them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys are doing some great things over at Ideal Practices, and Jamie's podcast is definitely a friend of our podcast. And I encourage all of my listeners to go listen to everything he's put out, because he's got a great, brilliant entrepreneurial mind. I learn a lot from him every time we meet. So he's a great resource to the dental community. So as far as everything we've talked about today, what are some of the things that we haven't touched on that you think are important for our listeners to know about?
I'd like to come back and talk about, because I have a lot of notes on financial literacy, and really the movement. I met a couple people at the meeting that were representatives of Ignite DDS and David Rice, and I've since talked to him about ASDA and some of the things that are happening there. And this is so important that I want students to know, and this is based on my observation and experience. They need to take responsibility for their financial literacy. It is not being done in schools for whatever reason. Okay, so don't assume that. And I think there's some advocacy in social media and groups saying, we want to teach you about these. It's what's so gratifying for me, because I told you I've done great things on a tiny scale. This is what I talked about 20 years ago, but I talked about it to 50 people. Mm-hmm. Okay, now David's like all over the country, and has this huge internet platform. He's going to give me a place on his web portal for complete health, and to let me kind of develop these and introduce these concepts to his entire audience. Okay, so that's going to be a great opportunity for me. But these people that I met at the meeting that were involved, they're just on fire. I mean, they really want. It's great for me to see, because it's not what you would expect today. You wouldn't expect people to be so excited and enthusiastic about. I don't know. I feed off of that entrepreneurial thing. I mean, I really do. When I see somebody, and part of the thing I was telling about the student that I had coffee with, and I looked at him and I said, man, that was like me. It took me a while to figure out, but I was like looking in the mirror. And at my stage of my career, that's extremely gratifying to help young people, fulfill their dreams and live out their dreams. Because if you were in dental school, you wouldn't even think that was possible. So that's why that's what I like what's going on, because it's about time that the students in organized dentistry say, hey, we want more. We want more. Perfect.
So yeah, we'll absolutely schedule another one to talk about financial literacy. I'd love to be able to talk about that more. So if someone wants to reach out to you, you're obviously a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge of all things dentistry. What's a good way for someone to be able to reach out?
Okay. My website is tomlarkin.com. My email is tom@tomlarkin.com. And then if they're interested in the complete health, it's the oralwellnesscenter.org. And then one of the things you had talked about, including something that people can download that's informational. Mm-hmm. I want to put something that I developed there that goes a little bit along the lines of why I like your metrics. And what it is it's a health questionnaire that is very visual. And I got this, it's a little bit of a knockoff of a TEDMed seminar that I saw someone present about patient compliance. And he was speaking to physicians, and I basically copied it and I applied it to periodontal risk, sleep apnea, and caries risk. And so this is something that for someone to look at and kind of absorb, that we can do a better job when our patients leave the office and they have a paper in their hand that meets certain recommendations as far as teaching them. Okay, we need to teach patients better. Okay, and so I'm going to get that to you so that your listeners can download and kind of take a look at that.
That's fantastic. So I've talked to a lot of people about, and I've mentioned on the past on the podcast, that whenever you're communicating to your clients or to your patients or whomever it is,
Yeah.
You're speaking from a professional's standpoint. It's very, very easy to get lost in your own head of what explanations are.
Right.
And sometimes it's easy to also not even talk about things because you just assume no one knows you assume everyone knows what you know, the most basic information you know. And I talk about I've talked about in the past on the podcast that me personally, even though I'm in the dental industry, before I entered it, I didn't even know that you were supposed to have 6-month recalls on Profi. I didn't know you're supposed to come back and have your teeth cleaned every 6 months.
Right.
No one had ever told me. The practices that I'd gone to in the past, the only times I'd ever gone, maybe if I had like a pain of some sort, and I have pretty healthy teeth. Like I think I've had like maybe 2 cavities my entire life. So like I just didn't know that was an issue.
Right.
And no one had ever explained it to me. Whereas if someone would have explained to me in the past, you need to come in so that we can fight decay and all these other things, I would have been coming in for Profis one way or the other. Because, I have very bad gums now, and, there's just a lot of issues with that I probably could have prevented if I had been instructed correctly. And so what we leave people with is very important when we're communicating with patients. And so this is something really cool, I think, that you're sharing with us.
Do you have a couple minutes so I can talk about my accounts receivable story?
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead.
Okay, this is a great story. So yesterday I got an appointment with the physical therapist. I'm a new patient. I come early, fill out my stuff. And the receptionist comes up and she says, she's got a copy of my medical insurance. He said, this is your deductible. This is your charge for today. And this is your portion, and we can take care of that now. And I'm like, wow, what part of that do I not understand? Okay. I mean, it was just, so I thought, okay, that's very cool. Okay. So I'm sitting there waiting, and it's a group practice and it's kind of busy. And I watch about 8 or 10 people kind of come in for their appointments. Mm-hmm. They immediately came forward and said to the front desk, can I make my copayment now? These people were like, they were just like completely trained. I've never seen that happen in a dental office. Normally you're like pulling teeth to get the copayment. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm saying is, I was amazed at how well trained that the clients were by the office personnel. And this is a major, major issue that's missing in dentistry because we don't do that. We're so in this practice, here's what I know. Their production equal their collection. This is 100%. Okay. Mm-hmm. There isn't any way around that. So when I see that dental practices are struggling with, collections of 95, 94, I'm like, why? Okay. This isn't a financial problem. It's a cultural problem. Mm-hmm. This particular physical therapy practice had a culture of, you come in, you make your copayment. Okay. It was awesome to witness. And it was, and it's a real take home point for people that they need to understand the various systems within, especially your financial system. There's no excuse for collections not being 100%.
Yeah, there's really not. And it's all about delivery, setting up an expectation and then delivering on that expectation in a lot of ways you interact with the patient and things like that. And just training them the right way. I had one, another really good one as far as to kind of take that into consideration that I've had some people have some success with is they complain about cancellations and no-shows. And I had one doctor that said that, the way they handled that was if someone doesn't confirm, then they are a cancellation. So they have, and they'll send something to them a month ahead of time just to remind them. And then a week ahead of time, they'll confirm. If they don't confirm, they'll send something like 4 days ahead of time, and they'll give them a phone call as well as an email. And then they'll call them again 3 days beforehand. And if they haven't confirmed, then that's a cancellation, regardless of if they, come in or not. And so what happens is if they come in, the rare times that they come in, they'll say, well, you didn't confirm your appointment. We're going to try and fit you in today. But just so you know, it's really, really important that you respond to the 3 text messages, 2 emails, and 2 phone calls that we gave you, because that makes us know that that we need to reserve your seat for that day.
Wow.
And so what happens after 6 months, everybody knows to do that.
Yeah.
And whenever they leave from the appointment, if it's the first time for the patient, you just instruct them, we're going to be confirming with you. And it's really important that you respond to that. Is this the best phone number for this, email, et cetera? And that doesn't work in every practice. Like if you have a Medicaid type practice, a lot of times their phone numbers won't be the same 6 months in the future. But that is one of the ways that,
I like that.
Go off the top of your point to say that, you're creating an experience and an expectation that the patient will appreciate the structure over time.
Yeah.
Because we've all got a million things going on in our head at every single point. And so if you've been given clear direction of how to do things, or you give someone some type of scripting to be able to go through these scripts of doing things in a certain way, most people will just fall in line and just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't offended. I mean, I got it. This is how much it is, and I'd like to be paid right now. That was the expectation that was created. Why are we not doing that in every dental office?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous problem that still is a chronic problem in practice. It was, it's a very, it's a cultural. The people there have an expectation. When you have somebody in the front that's embarrassed and say, "Oh, we'll bill you," or "We'll get that later," their expectation is it doesn't matter, and the people will live up to that expectation, which is it doesn't matter.
Absolutely, we're all creatures of habit.
So I thought it was cool. I just, it was a job well done, and I always like to recognize people that are doing things correctly.
Very cool. So we will have a part 2 definitely. And everyone, I urge you to reach out to Dr. Tom and say thank you for coming on and sharing his expertise and his information, as well as reach out if you have any questions for him. So again, Dr. Larkin, thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
A special thanks to Dr. Larkin for sticking around longer and providing some incredible insight into his business's journey, his revolutionary views of oral health, as well as his thoughts on the future of dentistry. And guys, he's been right a lot of times, so I have a lot of faith in his predictions. So, as you heard, certain oral health conditions can be indications of other potential health issues. So as a bonus for today, you can download Dr. Larkin's health questionnaire. This is what Dr. Larkin uses in his offices to assess potential health concerns outside of oral health. And so to get that bonus, simply text the word practice to 33444. Again, that's practice to 33444, or visit startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the U.S. You'll also receive updates on the latest episodes of Start Your Dental Practice, helpful tips for owning and running a practice, and promotional opportunities direct to your inbox. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you liked the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.